Odysseus, the celebrated son of Ithaca, whose renown spread throughout Greece, was born on the slopes of Mount Nereus, a gift of the gods to the small island. A subtle rain marked his birth, and his mother, inspired by the Romans, gave him the name Odysseus. Let's and Anticlea felt blessed with his birth, and the wise senator Chiron trained this young man. Destined for greatness. Chiron was born of Cronus, and the nymph Phillida took refuge on Mount Pelion and possessed wisdom that attracted heroes from far and wide. His ability to teach the arts, music, hunting, and, above all, medicine, was legendary. Odysseus for knowledge stood out among all his pupils, who absorbed his teachings like sponges. On an excursion with his grandfather, Autolycus, Odysseus conforms to the wild boar on a mount. Despite his prowess, he received a scar that he would carry throughout his life. The young prince of Ithaca traveled through Greece, becoming more and more known and respected. On one of his travels, he met Orsilochus, who, in an act of generosity, gave him a bow that had belonged to his father, King Eurotas, a gift from Apollo himself. Grateful to Odysseus, give him a sword and a spear in return. The adventures continued when he returned to Ithaca. Autolycus Odysseus' cunning grandfather had unconventionally acquired maras and was blessed with the cunning of Hermes. Autolycus transformed the maras so that they were unrecognizable. On another journey, Odysseus arrives at Calypso's island, where Aulis, grateful for his visit, presents him with a deadly poison for his arrows. With skill and practice, Odysseus became a warrior, second to none as he grew. Older Odysseus constantly sought guidance from Zeus in Athena, and his heart filled with nobility and respect, which led him to become the hero that everyone in Greece came to admire. As time passed, Odysseus matured and prepared to become king. His father, Laertes, gave him the kingdom, which he had built with wealth and power. Following his father's teachings, Odysseus began his rule in Ithaca. His mental agility and cunning made him very popular among his people, as he succeeded in expanding and enriching his kingdom. Now he had to choose his wife and future queen. Although he was attracted to Helen, a beautiful young daughter of Zeus and desired by many, she chose Menelaus as her consort and future king of Sparta. This implied that if anyone offended Helen, all her former suitors, including Odysseus, were unable to conquer. Helen traveled to Sparta, where King Icarus had a daughter, Penelope, about to be married. Icarus proposed to close the race with the promise that the winner would marry his daughter. Although Icarus was a formidable racer, Odysseus, although Icarus proposed that they stay in Sparta, chose to return to Ithaca with his new wife, who was warmly welcomed by the people. From their marriage, a son, Telemachus, was born, and together the family enjoyed peaceful times. However, the peace is interrupted when messengers arrive reporting that Helen has been kidnapped. All the former suitors, including Odysseus, try to search for her. Upon learning of the situation, Odysseus tries to feign insanity to avoid participating, but discovers Helen has been taken by Paris, a Trojan prince, who had fallen in love with her during a trip to Greece. Paris believed it was his divine destiny to be with Helen. This event triggered the famous Trojan War, in which Odysseus had to fight for years in great anger. Menon formed a vast team to invade Troy and recover Helen. Heroes such as Odysseus, Achilles and Agamemnon, after a decade of conflict, finally prevailed. After this decade-long war, Odysseus, anxious to return home, decided to travel a stretch with Agamemnon's men to his beloved Ithaca. Unfortunately, a fierce storm scattered Odysseus' men and ships. When the sea calmed and his crew arrived at the locals saw them as enemies, which led to a conflict that wiped out almost everyone on the island except a priest of Apollo. This priest offered Odysseus 12 bottles of an extremely potent wine that had to be mixed with water before drinking. Odysseus forgave the priest Maron after sacking the city. Odysseus went to sea, braving icy winds on their voyage. They found an unknown island. Odysseus sent 3 of his men to explore, but they did not return. Concerned, he sent more men who found the first 3 in an altered state due to a mysterious fruit, the lotus, which they had consumed. This fruit had erased all their memories, and they were taken back to the boat, where they only wished to continue eating the lotus. Odysseus, for them to recover, decided to leave the island. Then they arrived in Sicily, and while exploring, they found a cave full of food. While they were enjoying the feast, a giant cyclone named Polyus entered and blocked the exit with a large rock. Odysseus tries to negotiate his freedom by invoking Zeus, but Phemius defiantly claims not to fear him. Ignoring pleas, Phemius devoured 2 of Odysseus's men, leaving the rest terrified. During the darkness of the night, Phemius ate 2 men at dawn and left with his cattle for the field. Odysseus and his crew sought a means to escape the fearsome Cyclops and avoid being his next meal. Working together, they picked up a large olive branch, about 100 feet long, that belonged to the Cyclops. Firewood, Odysseus has sharpened it with his sword, planning to use it against the Cyclops to gain his freedom. At sunset, Polyphemus returned, and after eating 2 other men for dinner, Odysseus approached with a cup of wine as a gift. Upon tasting it, the Cyclops was amazed. When Polyus asks Odysseus by saying that his name is Nobody, the Cyclops are excited by the wine they drank, until he falls fast asleep. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the men heat the tip of the branch and plunge it into the Cyclops' eye, causing him immense pain. Hearing Phemius's cries, other Cyclops came to help, but when they asked what had happened, Polyphemus shouted that no one had attacked me. Confused, the Cyclops decided that if no one had hurt him, they could do nothing, and left the next morning. Anticipating this Odysseus' plan, he ordered his men to tie themselves under the sheep so that they could leave undetected by the cyclones. The plan worked, and all the men, still shaken by recent events, managed to escape and sail back to Ithaca. Upon reaching their next destination, Odysseus, in his abode Elis, controlled the winds. Upon learning that Odysseus had a bag containing all the winds of the world, Zeus advised Odysseus to take care of it, for only a gentle breeze would guide them to Ithaca, their home, with the promise of a safe return. As the days passed, they seemed to be on the right track, and the weary Odysseus and some of the crew suspected that the bag hid riches. Odysseus brought them back into Elis's domain. This time, however, an indignant Elis drove them from his land. In adrift again, they came to an island inhabited by cannibal giants, who attacked their ships with giant boulders. Only with cunning and skill did Odysseus escape. While others were not so lucky, later, they arrived at an island ruled by the sorceress Versa. The animals that greeted them seemed friendly, but there was something strange in the air. Odysseus sent a party to explore and get supplies, But when they were slow to return, one of the men discovered that Versa had transformed his companions into pigs with the help of the god. Hermes grants him a protective brew. Odysseus realizes that she is in front of the famous hero, and feeling captivated by him, he frees the men and transforms them back into humans. Odysseus is there for a while, resting and regaining strength, although the longing to return home to their loved ones, especially his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus, never disappeared. Vesta, with a heavy heart, allows Odysseus to sue. She suggests that he visit the underworld to ask the seer Theseus about the success of his journey. During that descent, Odysseus uses souls from the past, including his mother, with whom he manages to communicate and say a sad farewell. Tiresias warns him of the trials that still await him on his journey, but also assures him that he will eventually return to Ithaca and be reunited with his family with hope. Firm Odysseus returns to Versa to say goodbye, receiving valuable advice for his perilous journey. On his return, he faces the threat of the sirens resisting their enchanting song. He makes his crew cover their ears, and his desire is tied to the ship's mast. Although he tries to free himself to follow the seductive melody, his men hold him firmly until they are safe. The voyage continues with the threat of giant rocks and the appearance of Seer, a terrifying-looking monster, and Ketes, whose whirling whirlpools consume everything in their path. Despite losing several of their men, they make it through and the ship continues on its course. Time marches on, and with supplies running low, they reach an island full of sacred cows, belonging to the god Helios. Despite Odysseus's instructions not to harm these animals, hunger overcomes his crew and they consume some of them. This action triggers the wrath of Helios, who turns to Zeus for revenge. In response, Zeus sends a thunderbolt that destroys the ship, leaving Odysseus alone in the vast ocean. After struggling against the current for days, he reaches the island of the nymph Calypso, who falls in love with him despite Calypso's temptations and offers, including the promise of immortality. Odysseus' desire to return to Ithaca remains strong, and finally Hermes intervenes on Zeus' orders, urging Calypso to free Odysseus with provisions from the nymph. He begins another attempt to return, but a storm wrecks his ship. Once again, Odysseus, now without strength, wakes up on the shores of Calypso's island, where he is found by several women, who approach him when they see a completely naked man. Princess Nausicaa of the kingdom of the Phaeacians decides to help the unfortunate man by going to the palace with her father, King Alcinous. The king of the Phaeacians offers all his hospitality to Odysseus. Odysseus and she fell in love with the noble hero Aeneas. Aware of this, decides to offer the hand of his beloved daughter to Menelaus, and Odysseus refuses. Odysseus explains to the king that he should return to Ithaca and that his family was waiting for him because he had a wife named Penelope, and a son. With the uncertainty of knowing where his beloved Odysseus, very generous, understands Odysseus was very close to Ithaca, and orders to send a fleet to Ithaca to return Odysseus. And Odysseus, his eyes were filled with brightness when he saw the shores of Ithaca. He had finally reached his homeland. At last, he rested, sleeping deeply because he was close to the shore. The sailors took him down and left him a night of sleep on the island. When Odysseus in front of him, it was the goddess Athena, who advised him to visit Zeus, a servant of the palace, a man who would help him in his return to the throne. Zeus tells Odysseus that during the years he was away, several suitors joined him to marry his wife, and that he had to fight for her. In total, 108 suitors were willing to leave everything for Penelope. They had put so much pressure on the queen that they all took over the palace, enjoying all the riches of the kingdom. Until Penelope decided on one. Quickly, Odysseus asks about his beloved son Telemachus, and Acheusilaus tells him that his son did not agree with the men who pretended to be his mother, and that he had enough of them. The night passes, and in the morning Odysseus decides to enter the palace, disguised as a homeless man, so that no one recognizes him, especially not his wife's suitors. He was reunited with his son Telemachus, and that night he planned his revenge to defeat the men who were waiting for the throne. Penelope, surprised by the arrival of a stranger to the village, decides to talk to him and asks if he has heard anything about Odysseus. The disheveled stranger speaks to Penelope, swearing that her husband will be home very soon. Telemachus tells his mother to choose one of the suitors, putting us to the test. Finally, Penelope informs the suitors that they have to pass a test to choose the new husband and king of Ithaca. The test was that they had to use Odysseus' bow and demonstrate their aim. The one who managed to do it would be the new husband of Penelope. With no luck, none of the men managed to do so, nor could they even draw the string of the powerful bow. Finally, Odysseus the heartstring and manages to launch the powerful arrows, demonstrating his aim. Following his plan, he kills with his arrows Penelope's unfortunate suitors with the help of his son Telamon. Odysseus approaches Penelope, but she does not recognize him because it has been 20 years since the last time she saw him. However, very cute, the Greek hero describes several things about his life to his wife. In addition, he shows her the terrible scar he had on his knee because of a wild boar, and she finally recognizes him, full of happiness. At last, her beloved had returned after 20 years away from his home, far from his people, and far from the one who loved him deeply. He regained his throne, and at last, he could be at peace. Some accounts claim that Odysseus continued his adventures, even in his old age. On one of these journeys, he arrived in the territory of the dispute, where he met a stunning woman named Case and decided to stay by her side until she died. After this loss, Odysseus was reunited with his first wife, Penelope. It is also said that Odysseus is the fruit of his relationship with the goddess Vesta. However, a tragic turn of events led Leonis to inadvertently kill his father. Grief-stricken and full of remorse, Telemachus carried Odysseus' body to Penelope's house, where he was honored with a moving ceremony. Despite this tragedy, Odysseus ruled Odysseus' kingdom for many years and eventually spent his last days in Ithaca, surrounded by his loved ones and far from the ocean. In time, Tetanus developed feelings for Penelope and married her. Surprisingly, Vesta, his mother, accompanied them to Ithaca, and soon after, this son of Odysseus was attracted to Vesta and took her as his wife. The life of the intrepid Greek hero Odysseus thus ends, but his epic adventures and his longing for his return home left an indelible mark on the history of Greece and the world.